Tonight, water main breaks in Regina are making the annual spring runoff even worse.
The tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
Canada braces as the U.S. confirms it's implementing a 25% tariff on Canadian goods on Tuesday. Cocaine, drug houses, and undercover busts. Not today, but in 1920s Saskatoon.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It's Monday, March 3rd, and welcome to the CBC Saskatchewan News. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Plaster. Thanks for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump says 25% tariffs on Canadian imports will start on Tuesday. This despite his own top aide complimenting Canada's efforts in tackling concerns around the common border. But Ottawa says it's ready to hit back with billions in retaliatory measures, and when the levies kick in, Olivia Stefanovic has the latest.
On the eve of the latest tariff deadline.
We don't know what's coming tomorrow. I'm not even sure if President Trump knows what's coming tomorrow.
Confusion from Canadian officials.
I'd love to say that I know all the answers. I don't, and I wish I had a better answer for Canadians and those whose jobs are at risk.
I have no news to report on that front. The fact is that our government's first duty is to try and avoid these tariffs.
The Trump administration previously said the levies could be all but avoided.
The Mexicans and the Canadians have done a nice job on the border, meaning you have illegal crossings at their lowest level ever.
But the U.S. president himself says the plan to impose sweeping tariffs on his top two trading partners is moving full steam ahead.
On the tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight?
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
As Donald Trump added yet another reason for his decision.
Tomorrow, tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. So they're going to have a tariff. So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
If Trump is imposing tariffs, we're ready.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister says Ottawa is prepared with a $155 billion retaliatory response.
There's a level of unpredictability and chaos that comes out of the Oval Office, and we will be dealing with it.
The decision that's been announced, I think, is deeply regrettable and will have a very significant impact, not just on Canadians, but also on Americans. And so the dialogue will continue. But we are prepared to respond as required.
Unless he changes his mind, Trump's first round of tariffs are expected to take effect at midnight, marking the biggest increase to trade barriers that Canada has ever seen. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
Saskatchewan is finally beginning to thaw out, and along with the thawing, the inevitable sign of spring, water main breaks. Alexander Kwan has more.
A quiet residential street in South Regina was transformed into a lake last week as a nasty freeze-thaw cycle kick-started water main breaks in the city.
It was like we had a moat around our house about this wide.
Phil and Jackie Foth have lived in this home since the 70s and say they've never had an issue with the city's water systems. That changed on Friday as Phil woke up to see water coming up their driveway. City workers on site initially told him it looked like the water was receding. But that wasn't the case.
Because an hour and a half, 2 later, it was right around my house and going out the back into the park. And my window well filled up and I have water in my basement.
The Foths admit the scale of the water was intimidating.
See, these were full. Like the glass was 3/4 full of water. And this is where I had to, my neighbor and I, we pumped that out with some pumps. But there was so much water here, we had to get rid of that too before we could really empty the window well.
The Foths say the water streamed into their backyard, rising as high as their back step, before pouring into their basement, which will now have to be torn up and replaced. Their neighbor's front yard was left worse for wear. That's where the break actually happened, which left many in the area without water for most of Friday. A neighbor further down the street says it could have been much worse. He was originally told things wouldn't be up and running until this week.
There was nothing on Twitter, there was nothing on the city website, there was no information I never got a phone call. I never got a flyer hung on my doorknob, which is kind of what I'd expect. Hey, sorry, we had to shut your water off. Phone this number for more information. So I had to call them and to find out.
We've now received gifts of food and flowers from our neighbors. You couldn't ask for better people, that's for sure.
The Foths have insurance, which should help cover the repairs, but that will take a while because everything still needs to dry out. Alexander Kwan, CBC News, Regina.
It's a day that's been nearly 2 decades in the making. Survivors of the Île-à-Crosse residential school have finally settled a class action lawsuit against Ottawa. But the fight for recognition and compensation isn't over. Jeremy Warren has more.
They signed the agreement in principle last week, 17 years after survivors of the Île-à-Crosse residential boarding school sued Ottawa. The settlement establishes a pool of $27.3 million for survivors or their families, plus a $10 million community fund.
For the government of Canada to come to the table and sign on to an agreement to settle the Île-à-Crosse residential school. It truly is a very historic moment.
The Catholic-operated school ran from the 1860s to 1970s. More than 1,500 Métis and Indigenous children were forced to attend the school. Survivors have spoken about the physical and mental abuse they endured, but Ottawa hasn't officially recognized their trauma because the school predates the federal residential school system.
I thank the people, our elders and our survivors, that were adamant, that we needed the same recognition as all residential schools across this country.
Ottawa will also apologize to survivors as part of the agreement, but the legal fight isn't over. Survivors are still pursuing a lawsuit against Saskatchewan. The group hopes to avoid litigation and is sending the province a settlement proposal.
In this settlement, Canada has sort of we'll take 50% of the blame. Saskatchewan needs to take the other 50%, and they need to compensate our survivors.
About 500 survivors are still alive. The oldest are in their late 90s. A final formal agreement is being drafted by both parties. Once it's finalized, the Métis Nation says the claims process will be expedited. Jeremy Warren, CBC News, Saskatoon.
There's a new pig butchering scam targeting Saskatchewan residents, and investigators believe people here have been duped out of tens of millions of dollars. Adam Hunter heard more about it on the CBC's Morning Edition.
Basically, they contact you sort of out of the blue, either through social media or a text message, and they try to draw you into a conversation. And it's a long con, right? They try to build a relationship with you over a long period of time. The more they get to know you, the more they learn about you, your needs, your vulnerabilities. And when they get to a point where they feel they have your trust, they'll say, well, gee, we have such a close relationship, or I know you need money for retirement. I have this really good idea, guaranteed you're going to make huge returns, solve all your problems, and I'm only giving this to you because we're so close. And so you give them money, and they keep asking, and they keep the relationship going until you don't have any more money, or you ask to withdraw something. Then they disappear with your money.
And how common is this becoming?
Well, it's growing all the time, with the rise of social media and technology and so on. We have about $3.4 million lost last year in Saskatchewan, and we think that's only about 10% of the total number, because a lot of it isn't reported to us.
And why is that?
I think people just don't know. Maybe they're a bit embarrassed about having gotten into this thing. Maybe some people, the money's gone and they just kind of give up. There's all kinds of reasons why people don't report to us.
And Marika, that's where you come in trying to raise awareness about this. So what are you trying to do this week with putting a spotlight on this issue?
Absolutely. So the FCA is launching an advertising campaign across the province, and March is actually Fraud Awareness Month. So we are doing a campaign with social media, billboards, ice rink ads, bathroom ads, bus ads, you name it. We really want to get the information out there to the people of Saskatchewan just about pig butchering scams to hopefully raise that awareness and prevent people from losing money.
An update on the health of Pope Francis. Vatican officials said he needed to go back on oxygen. This morning, the Vatican put out a one-line bulletin stating the Pope rested well all night. He was reportedly up and undergoing therapy, as well as carrying out some of his papal duties. He was taken off medical ventilation yesterday, but is still dealing with the effects of double pneumonia. The Pope was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on February 14th. The nice weather and the very slow melt continue today across many parts of the province. It makes for some nice weather to take a walk around Wascana Park in Regina, maybe even some time to sit and watch the ducks. Will the spring temperatures continue? Well, Ethan Williams will tell us more in just a bit. Stick around, everybody. Welcome back. It was a three-part newspaper series on the drug trade in Saskatoon. The stories featured cocaine, drug houses, and undercover busts, and it led to half a dozen convictions. Now, the surprising part is when it happened. Dan Zakreski explains.
This right here is where a reporter armed with a gun and a police bodyguard went undercover a century ago. But why? To do an expose of the cocaine and opium trade in Saskatoon's Chinatown. Christian Smith Jr.'s three-part series ran in 1924. He focused on the New York Chop Suey House restaurant that sat on this corner 100 years ago. Police sent him into the restaurant with a gun in his pocket and a bodyguard nearby. And his task? Buying drugs for the police, packets of cocaine, $2 each. Christian Smith Jr. was 24 when he started working as a police reporter. As part of his job, he met with police every day. The police had been raiding drug dens in Chinatown since 1920 and showing off their seizures in the paper.
Every time Chinatown gets mentioned, it's an opium bust or cocaine is part of a larger, drug problem. 60% of the crime in Saskatoon is drug related.
At this time, all the drug dealers knew all the cops. Remember, this was Saskatoon in 1924, a city of 30,000 people, and the cops had already been doing raids in Chinatown. But the cops and the reporter saw an opportunity. Smith Jr. would go to drug houses posing as a reporter with a coke habit, and he'd buy drugs. And that's exactly what he did, over and over and over again for 3 weeks. Did I mention the cops gave him a gun? In the end, the cops got the drugs. Chris Smith Jr. got the exclusive. I tracked down Smith Jr.'s son, who is 97 years old and living in London, Ontario. He says his dad loved to tell the story.
They asked him, we're investigating drug trade in Saskatoon and in the Chinatown area, and would you be interested in helping us? So he became a drug addict suspect, sort of.
In the end, Smith Jr.'s series led to the arrest of 5 men and a woman. But he admitted in his last installment he never did track down the mysterious kingpin who ran the drug trade in Chinatown. Dan Zakreski, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Great work, Dan. We've all experienced some slipping and sliding on the roads this winter, but over the weekend, some drivers outside Regina got a lot more than that. As Helena Mahalik reports, it was all on purpose.
Despite the warm temperatures in Saskatchewan, there was still enough frozen ice on Echo Lake for car lovers to hit the track this past weekend. Drivers channeled their inner Fast and Furious at the 9th annual Winter Drift Fest in Fort Qu'Appelle. Colton Ryan has been drifting for the last 13 years.
It's a lot of fun just keeping the car on that fine line of out of control and in control and just riding it out there.
So what is a drift race? Drivers compete against each other while purposely oversteering without traction, all while staying in control of the car and making turns.
It's a little wild, it's a little wild sport, and you can express yourself in your driving skills. And it is very tough. So I mean, and it looks dangerous, but out here you're going relatively slow, so it's not that dangerous at all.
Usually drifting events are hosted in the summer, but Kyle Zimmer says this winter event is popular because it's easier to spin on the ice.
We host some ice drifting from beginners all the way to experts. So we had about 40 vehicles out yesterday on the ice, different talents and skill sets. So it was pretty cool to see.
But for drifters, it's not all about the sport. With multiple events being hosted every year, Ryan says the drifting community is like a family.
A lot of us are all friends and everyone's super nice. Like, that's one of the good things about the drift community is like everyone helps everyone. Someone breaks down and other crews and people are coming in to help, and it's really great.
This drift event has been so successful, the organizer is hoping to have 2 winter drift races next year. Helena Mahalik, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Ethan Williams is now in with a look at weather. And Ethan, you know how the saying goes, in like a lamb, out like a lion for March. Where are we looking right now?
Well, definitely starting like a lamb, and I hope we go out like a lamb as well. Sometimes I think the opposite happens when, comparing the start of the month to the end of the month. But certainly the month of February was a little more extreme, and we have kind of the precipitation and temperature data from Environment Canada now kind of looking back at the month of February. And you can see in terms of precipitation, as usual, kind of hit and miss. Regina, Yorkton, Moose Jaw really benefiting from a couple of storm systems that moved through, and that brought us well above the average amount of moisture that we usually get. But you get into parts of west central Saskatchewan and in some places barely getting a third of what you normally see in an average February. Temperature-wise, I think we'll all remember February for just how cold it was, especially for a good 3 weeks of the month. There was a lot of us who almost every day in February we were below seasonal, and as a result, look at this, 5, 6, in some cases 7 degrees below seasonal on the month. That's pretty remarkable to see temperatures that much below seasonal, especially when we're looking into the winter months. Things though have of course rapidly improved, and we're looking at much nicer temperatures through south and central Saskatchewan, hitting that freezing mark again, or some of us a few degrees above that. Into northern Saskatchewan, though, that is where we're seeing a bit of some cooler Arctic air moving in, but a -9 at Stony Rapids. That's still really not all that bad for this time of year. Our attention going now to some snowfall, though, that has been moving through southern Saskatchewan, and that system has been bringing cloud cover to much of us through the province. But again, it's really southwestern and south central areas that are seeing this snowfall through the day, just kind of passing south of Regina and south of the Trans-Canada corridor. Some of this has also been changing over to rain at periods through the day on Monday. That snow is going to keep moving eastward as we head through the night, so places like Weyburn and Estevan, you may get skirted by a little bit of some snow. It's not going to be much accumulation, though. I think we're only in for another 1 to 3 centimeters. High pressure starts moving in tomorrow, so we're looking at areas out west getting some clearing, but still some cloud cover hanging on, especially as this next low makes its approach kind of across northern Saskatchewan. Again, a little bit of snow moving through northern sections. I think we're only looking at maybe a couple of centimeters from that moving through. Wednesday, we get a little bit more substantial clearing through south and central Saskatchewan. And then as we get into Thursday, we're watching a little bit more snow crossing the northern grain belt. But again, really no significant weather systems. We've seen a little bit of wind picking up here and there through southern Saskatchewan through Monday, but I think as we get that area of high pressure moving in, we'll start to see that come down. That next low could pick up gusts a bit through the central part of the province, but I don't think it's going to be anything too severe. And our temperature pattern this next little while staying pretty on seasonal or even a bit above that. You see that warm weather still moving in from out west makes temperatures look something like this. We'll be near normal in Regina over the next few days here, and then jumping in some cases a few degrees above the freezing mark as we head into the weekend. For Saskatoon, again, I think we're staying near freezing these next few days with a mix of sun and cloud. A little bit more cloud cover for Friday, but the weekend is looking gorgeous. Again, jumping above that freezing mark, and the temperatures overnight staying above -10. So after kind of those extreme warm-ups and cool-downs of February, Dan, looks like March is bringing us a bit of a different forecast.
So we would love a lammy March.
Yes, a lammy all the way.
Love it. Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
All our relations.
This flag raising outside Saskatoon City Hall marks the beginning of Diversity and Race Relations Month. The city will focus on diversity and inclusion all month long. It's an ongoing issue that representatives say still needs to be addressed in workplaces, schools, and institutions across Saskatchewan. People from all walks of life were involved in kicking off the event at City Hall. We will return with more after the break. A big night for Anora at the Oscars and its director, Sean Baker.
And the Oscar goes to Anora, Sean Baker!
Anora won 5 awards. Baker took home 4 statues himself for Best Director, Picture, Original Screenplay, and Editing. No one has managed that since Walt Disney in 1954, but Baker is the first to do it for a single film. Anora's Mikey Madison also won for Best Actress. Thanks to a change in the weather, firefighters are gaining ground against wildfires in the Carolinas. More than 300 fires are burning in total across the 2 states, prompting a state of emergency. The largest fire is threatening an area just north of Myrtle Beach, a popular tourist destination in South Carolina. Hundreds of homes are at risk and residents are under mandatory evacuation orders. One shelter in the area has received at least 100 evacuees. So far, there are no reports of injuries. About 200 wildfires are burning across North Carolina, but most are small and not threatening structures. High winds and a lack of rainfall is keeping the wildfire danger high in both Carolinas and into parts of northern Georgia. Ethan's back with one last look at the weather. How are we looking?
We're expecting a little bit of some snow, I think, through the night, Dan, as we go Monday to Tuesday here through especially extreme southern Saskatchewan, especially if you're south of the Trans-Canada corridor. Further southwest, Maple Creek, Cypress Hills, maybe another 2 to 4 centimeters, just a centimeter or 2 if you're kind of in south central and southeastern sections. For the rest of us, though, I think along the Trans-Canada corridor, we are expecting mostly cloudy nights. Central Saskatchewan, though, I think we'll get some clearing in the overnight hours. Temperatures, though, staying above average for those overnight lows. Into northern Saskatchewan, also some pretty nice temperatures overnight as well. Cloudy with a chance of flurries, but especially through the Churchill region as we get into Tuesday. That's where we'll see some clearing skies and temperatures once again likely getting over the freezing mark. South and central, a tale of 2 different regions as we get into Tuesday. Southern Saskatchewan still cloudy with occasional flurries and highs probably closer to -5, but some clearing skies through central regions, Dan, as temperatures jump above the freezing mark likely once again.
Looks good.
Indeed.
Thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
And that's all we have for you for now. Now, for more news anytime, head to cbc.ca/sask or subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel. And don't forget our app as well. See you all tomorrow.